Big difference, big difference. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for coming back from non-existing break. The best way to start and make people convenient here is just we start. And then the people will probably find out that we are already in process. First, I have an honor and privilege to start moderating the panel number 1, review of the status of the challenge. I have extreme pleasure to have really 3 distinguished speakers who can set the stage for the next panels after this great opening remarks that we heard just recently. I have with me here Yalchin Rafiyev, who is lead negotiator of COP29, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Azerbaijan. Of course, here is Rosen Plevneliev, member of the board of NGIC and President of Bulgaria in a very interesting period of European and Bulgarian recent history. And of course, last but not least, the Csaba Korosi, president of previous, or 77th session of the United Nations General Assembly. So we'll have 3 perspectives, one from the person who really walks the talk and who is in charge of very practical things. And I'm sure that he will give us good introduction of what are the key challenges that are next, let's say, 3 months or 6 months, because we also want to figure out what will happen after COP, immediately after COP, what will be the push for the next stages of this great journey. Now, just to give some points about where we are. First challenge for us is to see, what's happening since 2015, since SDGs were established, and Agenda 2030, because just as we spoke a few months ago on Global Baku Forum, SDGs are on halfway to Agenda 2030, but all metrics are saying that we are about, at the best, on 1/3 of the fulfillment of SDGs. When it comes to climate change, we heard figures that are more depressive than the ones about SDGs. Of course, we would like to see what are the concrete steps and what we can expect from COP29 to get some additional push to our goal of 1.5 degrees going down. What we can expect that COP29 and what should be done in order to give a little bit better guidelines about fulfilling our goal that we reduce emission by 45% by 2030. Are we on a path at all, or what should be done? And finally, what is about the goal of zero net emission by 2050? Are we really proceeding there, or we're going in the right direction? The next point is what should be done and what we should expect. And Jean's favorite topic, which we'll have a special session on it, how we can put together the stakeholders and create some kind of, as we like to say, alliance of like-minded people of entities, member states, international organizations, and private sector, and how we can have a pathway to put together scientific community, academic community, NGO sector, member states, UN-related and international organizations with member states, and to put private sector in a position that private sector is interested, not do charity with climate change, but do the real work in some kind of public-private partnership or other models that would be around. So in that respect, I would ask His Excellency, lead negotiator. It sounds terrifying. Lead negotiator. He's the guy who's supposed to put together the real work. And on the end of the day, it's very interesting that a country like Azerbaijan is in charge of putting together all those weak players on a stage to a common agreement on what to do, that COP29 is a significant upgrade from COP28 and good platform for COP30 to have less job, because COP29 is putting us in next year. So let's hope that COP29 is going to move us from cargo to business, skipping economy. So, Mr. Rafiyev, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you so much. Yeah, it sounds very terrifying, the title itself, but also it's a worst job for the moment on the earth, probably, to come to a consensual conclusion on an issue that is really very hard to bridge the gaps and bring to a consensual end, especially when it comes to the climate finance. Yeah, I was tasked to set the stage, and I'm sorry at the beginning that I will draw a bit pessimistic picture, because by that I can then deliver on what should we do in the coming months in order to make it better. Of course, communities continue to suffer from the adverse effects of the climate change around the world. If we compare whether, if we try to assess whether we are on track in implementing our commitments deriving from the Paris Agreement on keeping the temperature rise within 1.5 degrees, the clear answer is no. If we look into the statistics, the figures, the 2023, according to World Meteorological Organization, was the warmest year on record. 13 months already, consequent months were hit the records in terms of temperature rise, and we cannot, at least in the near future, expect it to get better. Recently with the CPD, we were in Caribbean islands, in Antigua, Barbuda, and then we visited Barbados, and we had a chance to see by our own eyes how those communities really are facing the existential threat. And the Prime Minister of Tuvalu, in our meeting with him, he was referring that when I leave the country, I'm not sure whether if I come back to my country, I can find it exists or not. But this is something that we cannot compare as how we see the climate change by our own eyes. So it was really truly humbling to see those places where the humanity's success or failure will be judged clearly, so clearly. So in these countries, you can really feel how this temperature, keeping 1.5 degrees within reach, is important, because those people are really facing existential challenges. But is it only certain sectors of the economy that contribute to greenhouse gas emissions? Certainly not. It's not only the fossil industry, it's transportation, agriculture. The tourism is 8% of the global greenhouse gas emission. Only civil aviation constitutes 2% of the global greenhouse gas emission. And we need to have a comprehensive and complex approach to the issue in order not to reduce greenhouse gases, and not only carbon dioxide, but there are 6 types of gases. We are usually in our activities, in our undertakings, we are concentrating only one type of the greenhouse gas that causes the climate change, but we need to pay attention to others as well. They are in total 6. We call them super pollutants, and they are not only creating emission and causing global warming, but they are also pollutes the air, and it directly links it to the health problem for many. Recently, we concluded the Bonn session, SP, subsidiary body's 60th session, where we had a chance as a COP29 incoming presidency to test the positions of the parties on certain expected deliverables from COP29. There are 2 major expectations and deliverables. They are new collective quantified goal and Article 6 on carbon markets. What was inspiring us was the constructive spirit within the rooms. Unlike last year, we adopted the agenda of the session on the first day. Last year, even the adoption of the agenda took 8 days for the parties to agree. And I think this year, as we started in the positive mood by adopting the agenda on the first day, really set a positive mood for all negotiating rooms. So on the first week, we have observed very constructive negotiations among the parties. We had already agreed on several deliverables that were forwarded to Baku to be adopted in November. But on the major two issues, on the NCQG and on Article 6, I think they are the matters we cannot resolve at the negotiators level. They need higher level political engagement and political decision making when it comes to especially the quantum and the contributor base of the new collective quantified goal. Of course, it's perfectly normal to see the divergent views among the parties, but the most important is how we can bring together the parties to agree on those issues that they find agreeable. And in response to your question, what would be the next steps in the coming 6 months or 5 months, let's say, until COP? We as incoming presidency are supposed to provide platforms for the parties in the first hand. So we need to create additional avenues for the parties to come together and to discuss whatever they have as a paper in order to lead us to the finish line successfully. On NCQG, for example, the co-chairs of the ad hoc work program, they came up with a paper which was 63 pages as a zero draft. We called it even a sub-zero draft. And this 63 pages in only 1 week was shortened to 35 pages. So it shows a genuine, already constructive spirit among the parties that they also understand that it is a time now to agree on this deal, because otherwise, if we don't provide this means of implementation for the parties, raising ambitions that don't mean anything. So far, up to COP29, we have raised ambitions so far. Now the parties are asking and insisting that they should have a means of implementation to start implementing those ambitions. And if we expect the parties to come up with their updated indices in February of next year, with their new, more ambitious indices, we need to provide them with the finance, with the funding. And those funding should not be limited only to public funding. We should have also private sector to be engaged. We should have multilateral development banks and IFIs to be engaged. Therefore, outside of the COP process, developments are also important. That we should continue to push for the multilateral development banks to reform, the international financial architecture to be restructured. We should also talk to private sector to engage more actively. Just one simple example on that. One of the major reasons that impede the private sector to engage more actively is the false perception of investment by the private sector in some developing countries. Like in Africa, for example. More than 50% of the global solar power capacity is in Africa, but only 2% of the global investment was put there. It shows once again that those kind of misperceptions about the risk, about the investment by the private sector, indeed really creates problems in developing countries. And why I'm calling it misperception, because according to empirical research, actually those investments put in Africa on solar power brought revenue. So if it brought revenue, it means that there is no such risk actually persisting. And in the way ahead to COP, we are going to organize a retreat in Azerbaijan in the second part of July, bringing together the parties in a more informal circumstances to talk to each other, to break the ice, first of all, to see where are the converging points, where are the most diverging points in their positions, so that we as incoming presidency, whenever necessary, to jump in and start already making some bridges among the parties. And that was one of the mottos, to be a bridge maker among the parties. And on Article 6 is a long-standing unresolved issue in the COP process, coming from Glasgow. The majority of the parties, absolute majority I would say, are very keen to get this adopted finally in Baku. And we already started to see positive signals in that regard. The major stakeholders, European Union and US, who had the major diverging views on that, started to talk to each other already. And we have found out that whatever problems existed in the Article 6 domain was mainly because of the technical level negotiators' even personal approach to the problem. So once we elevate the discussions from technical to political level, then we have identified and found out that the issues actually on Article 6 were narrower than we thought. So we will also try to provide platforms for the Article 6 negotiators to come together to agree on their on those issues that they think are agreeable by Baku. And finally, loss and damage. This is one of the issues that we keep receiving inquiries from the parties that it finally needs to be operationalized. And Sharm el-Sheikh adopted the loss and damage fund decision. UAE consensus pushed it forward a bit to adopt the funding mechanism and the board of governors of the fund. And now in Baku, there is a turn to operationalize it. And we will be hosting in September the third meeting of the board of governors of the fund to keep our push, to have our push to the process in order to finalize it by COP29. So with this, I would like to conclude my remarks and would be happy to answer any questions if there will be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rafiyev. Now, Rosen, whatever I do ask you, you know where you're going to answer anyway. Please.
Thank you, my dear chair and partner in this endeavor. Very proud to be a member of NGSC Advisory Board to the Presidency. In my capacity also as the head of state of government, I was very proud back in 2015 to be part of the global consensus, to be part of global negotiations, and to put my signature into the two last, I think, global documents that were a matter of global consensus, that matter to the next generations and to the planet, and that was the SDGs, and that was the Paris Agreement. That's why I'm very passionate about being here, sharing my also thoughts about what is important. We want COP29 to be a success. The only way for COP29 to be a success is to build up on the foundations of the two last global consensuses built. Everybody who is anybody on the planet came together on a consensus. And that was 2015. That's SDGs and that's Paris Agreement. So there is no way for COP29 to be successful unless it builds on the foundations of those two major global consensuses and agreements. So that's one. Second, we want COP29 to be a success, but success needs to be well communicated. If it's not well communicated, it's not a success. And part of our communication is to show a different Azerbaijan. Show the devastated area of the new integrated parts of Azerbaijan, bombed, killed, exterminated, that will turn to globally ambitious, leading master plans of villages of the future, of cities of the future. Show your ambition about Azerbaijan being so rich of fossil fuels, but doing the opposite, taking a very key engagement about a future that is clean, green, for the children of Azerbaijan. What I'm trying to say is that we have an amazing opportunity, much better than Formula One, to show a different, modern, world-leading, ambitious Azerbaijan, and we should use the opportunity. So having our own propaganda in place, having our own communication plan in place, we need to have it right now. As a member of the advisory board, I want to see it very soon. But we also need to have, I'm bringing now a joke, hopefully, but just a kind of brainstorming tool. We also need to have a crisis management plan integrated within our communication plan. So when is COP29 going to happen? November this year. What do we have in November this year? Elections in the United States. What if Trump is elected on 5th of November to be a president of the United States? What about our communication plan? How do we make a difference? How are we important? What if Trump does what he did back in 2017 as he was elected? The first thing he did, he said, I'm pulling United States out of Paris Agreement. What if the President of the United States is not even coming, is not sending the Secretary of State? We need to have a crisis management that says very clearly, no matter what happens with global powers, we are leading with integrity. Everybody is integrated within our Azeri plan for COP29. We lead with a clear plan beyond political dramas here and there and everywhere. It is a plan for the world, and it is not a plan for one or another political leader who might be a populist and who might be using the opportunity to make a difference by confronting COP29 or building his own legacy on the opposite. As you remember very well, Trump did exactly the same in 2017. The first thing he did, he canceled the American engagement on the Paris Agreement. So we need to be prepared for that. And also, speaking about our communication plan, think about what we said. I participate in so many meetings. It's a financial COP, COP29. It's coming as a financial COP. I disagree. I don't agree to that. My opinion is, anytime you talk about money, you lose the content. You lose the sense. Money, to me, is a technique, as you said, is not the content. Money comes when we have the idea of projects that make sense for the planet. And that is why I would be very cautious about talking billions and trillions, and you will never find a consensus about this. But I would come to a most important thing I would like to share with you, and that is, I studied in the days before I came here, a very simple exercise I did. What about the former COPs? All of them. I participated in some of them. I participated. What is the outcome? One sentence. The outcome is one sentence. So what is the one sentence of COP28? What is the one sentence of COP27? How do they make history? From our point of view, how we can make history. I was the president. I know very well. If you are even the president, it's one sentence at the end. You could be very strong. You can win. You can lose. You can fight the others. You can speak every day on the national TVs. At the end, it's one sentence. So what is the sentence of COP28? So look at that. The biggest, 85,000 participants, 150 heads of state and government. I believe we can hit that. We will be more. But is that the content just to be the biggest? It's not. COP28, results. I checked 100 different sites. Here is results. Signaling the beginning to the end of fossil era. Signaling. Enhancing global efforts to strengthen resilience. Signaling and enhancing. Linking climate action with nature conservation. Ramping up practical climate solutions. Looking ahead to COP29. So the most important result of COP28 to me is looking ahead to COP29. Congratulations to Azerbaijan. You guys are having a great opportunity to do something more than just signaling, enhancing, linking, ramping up and looking ahead. So what could be our historical moment? How can we make history by COP29? Definitely the approach is right. We heard it today. It's inclusive. Everybody, rich, poor, big, small, populist, whoever, autocrats, Democrats, all of them are coming here in an inclusive approach to build up on the last global consensuses made in 2015. It's enabling, but in a different way. You will make history, for example, if you bring the private sector in a different way, because this is where the money is. This is where actually the silent, I will keep it very close, the silent revolution comes in the European Union, in the United States, in Azerbaijan, in many China, and many, where the private sector is already weaponized with the technologies of the future. ESG is a global standard. Whoever, whatever does, and talking to the banks, we should talk to the banks in Africa, to the global banks, to the big, to the smaller banks. Whatever we do, you need to have the ESG component. That is already happening in a very big part of the world, and I'm very optimistic. It is in the focus, but we need to just hammer it. That silent ESG revolution is everywhere in the private sector, and we should harness it. So my conclusion, as simple as this, is that we will listen those 2 days to extremely wise people coming here, and we need to come up, to wrap up a communication plan that will tell us right now what is the way, the plan. We are going to make history back in November 29, beyond anything that will happen on the planet until then. And I'm sure as NGAC board and the Azeri government work very closely together, we will be able of achieving this historical message, plan, and result for the planet. Thank you, Zlatko.
Thank you, Rosen. Original as ever, and very precise and forward-oriented. Looking at you, Csaba, now I expect you to give us another concrete guidelines.
Thank you much, Zlatko. It's very, very tempting immediately to jump some of the questions Rosen and Yalchin have raised. Before going one by one, let me just say, Rosen, if the second largest polluter would not be present at COP29, it still would not mean that the climate crisis is over. It would not offer any solution to us. So we have to remind ourselves that it is not up to the willingness of one person, that it is the responsibility of all of us together. Zlatko, at the beginning you mentioned the sustainability transformation and the very off-track status, how we are. Let me first react on that, because I'm a little bit responsible for what we call today the SDG system. Let me mention 5 areas where we are witnessing very serious challenges, and these 5 areas are automatically translating themselves into the climate negotiations as well. First, it was mentioned already this morning, we have the highest level of geopolitical rivalry in the last 70 years. And it is overwriting the necessity of cooperation over the challenges related to the global common goods. So if we keep applying the zero-sum game mentality that is coming from the geopolitical competition to the issues related to the global common goods, then we will end at a double zero-sum game or negative-sum game. So my humble advice, coming back to one of the questions raised here, whether or not is there any lessons learned from that for COP29. If we can create a spirit, even in the form of a declaration, that we embrace our shared responsibility, which is more important than some of the geopolitical competition on a number of issues. We need to separate them as much as we can. And second, it was also mentioned this morning that more than 50 armed conflicts are being waged in the world. Let us recall that sustainability transformation is not compatible with armed conflicts. We've designed the SDGs in a way that's supposed to concentrate all the resources, all the scientific, intellectual, financial, and technological resources of the nation or nations in order to make the transformation. If armed conflicts are introduced, then the priority of each and every country will be changed. Sustainable transformation will go down to drain. The third, and it very closely related already to these climate negotiations, we are lacking an integrated measurement of transformation. We do not really know where we are with the sustainability transformation. We measure standalone parameters. In the field of climate, we are still in better shape because we know the emissions, we know the temperature rise, we know the sea level rise in concrete figures. But if we ask ourselves, in overall impacts, in overall transformation where we are, the honest answer, we do not really know. We are lacking this measurement, and it is very likely that the Summit of the Future in September will not produce this measurement, just giving a marching order. So my expectation from COP29 would be also to call for an urgent production, urgent development of this measurement system. Another one which is coming also from the sustainability transformation caveats, but we see it in the climate negotiations as well. We have an outdated perception of financing sustainable development. In the minds of many people, the financing debates are portraying somehow that we need to do the business as usual, and with some extra money, we'll make the whole transformation, as if that extra money would make the trick. No, it's not true. We need to rethink the whole budgeting and planning processes. That will make the transformation. If we do the same and ask for some extra money, the extra money will melt and it will disappear. And last but not least, on this point, we have a lot of ideological debates in the climate negotiations as well as in broader sustainability terms. These ideological debates, which are very closely related to the geopolitical competition, are overshadowing the science-based integrated calculations. If we do not switch for a more science-based integrated calculations, then we are going to have misguided investments, crossed tipping points, and failure in the transformation we would like to see. On some of the very concrete issues colleagues have mentioned, with the current policies in terms of climate change, with the current policies, we are projecting to reach at least 2.7 Celsius by the end of the century. It is way beyond what we can still weather as a normally functioning societies. If we take the implementation of the current NDCs, then, and everybody would implement everything without any caveat, in time, the temperature rise would still be 2.5 Celsius. It is also way beyond the real danger level. What does it mean? If we can influence the content of the next generation of the NDCs, we have to make sure that it is compatible with the Paris goals. The alarming news that the climate change is not with us. The speed of the climate change is accelerating. In the last 15 years, the speed of the climate change, speed of the temperature rise, to be quite precise, has increased by 30%. So even if we start decreasing the emissions, the temperature rise will still keeps going, and now this keeps going is much faster than many years before. So what does it mean? NDCs are still not standardized enough. Some of them use different base years, different consistency, different arithmetics, but all national commitments leave the bulk of the efforts for the end of the period. It means that the implementation will be basically failing. So if we cannot do much of the heavyweight lifting in the forthcoming 2-3 years, but leaving it for the next 10-15 years, then the game is more or less lost, and it will be very, very difficult to come back. And last point. We know that the energy, as it came out from the Dubai COP28, energy is in the center of our discussions. And we are supposed to forward the energy transition. It is necessary, and it is a very significant way how to reduce emissions. But let's be quite honest. There have been many energy transitions in the past history, from wood to coal, from coal to oil, from oil to nuclear, to gas and renewables. But energy transition has never meant to fully phase out something. All the previous sources of energy are with us. Now the task is, how can we shift the balance? And the second, the first time in history, can we do to phase out any of them? We have never done it. So if we can give a push to that at COP29, it will be absolutely important. The good news that investments into the renewable energies are really at the historic heights. In 2023, last year, $1.7 trillion have been invested into the clean technologies, the clean sources of energy, compared to $1 trillion invested still into the fossil fuels. But still, 80% of our energy is coming from the fossil fuels. And the proportion of the fossil fuels is roughly remaining the same. So what we need to tilt to start reducing much faster, this 80 plus percent. The good news that in the highly industrialized countries, the emissions started declining. Now the emissions in the most industrialized countries are at the level of 1973. It has never happened in the last 40, 50 years. But still, it is not enough. It is still not compatible with the Paris goals. There are two groupings with whom, if we can make a better understanding, the G7 and the G20. The G7 countries are producing about almost 70% of the greenhouse gas emissions in the world. The G20 are producing about 80% of the greenhouse gas emissions in the world. So if they assume the responsibilities, the rest will follow. For the time being, we are not on that track. For the time being, we are sitting in the same boat. We are all drilling holes in the same boat. And we are discussing who will pay the bill of the next week's luncheon. If we want to have a luncheon the next week, we have to talk about how are we drilling the holes in the boat, probably stopping drilling the holes as much as we can. Now let me stop here.
And before opening the floor to you, I would like to just have a few quick questions as a first flashback on what we just heard. To our chief negotiator, you're our chief negotiator because you're chief negotiator for all of us. Actually, Azerbaijan is just a host. You are just giving a platform and trying to make a good environment for the at least 5 big players or group of players: USA, China, European Union, India, Global South, if we can put it that way, developing countries. It is self-evident that the financing is the big issue. We are witnessing, and we all know different calculations, different estimates. Some estimates are saying that, you know, for mitigation, adaptation, and resilience, at SDG 13 and related issues, there are estimates that are going between $2 and $5.7 trillion annually. We know that's a figure that is very nice as academic paper, but I mean, it's far, far away from it. We have this, when I see Ismail, I've seen here food. There's that International Food Policy Research Institute that actually said that SDG and climate change objectives only for developing countries, excluding China, suggest that there is additional need for additional financing in the area of $3 and $4 trillion, out of which only for food safety, it's about 680 billions. Having said so, I mean, we have after the meeting that you're hosting next month, there is a pre-COP ministerial, then there will be on the Summit of the Future in United Nations big gathering where you will have additional, let's say, movements. Then finally there's October annual meeting of IMF and World Bank. What can we expect? That's one question, I mean, when it comes to financing, because everyone understands, and even this Bonn meeting showed that this is the big challenge, one of the biggest challenges we are confronting. And it would be good if you could say what we, as NGIC platform, as our advisory board that is shared by Madam Espinosa and Tarja Halonen, I mean, what we can do, to make this alliance of like-minded people and entities that we want to make global, at least chief negotiator and us are in alliance, that we do walk together. So.
Thank you, Excellency. Yeah, as you rightly mentioned, the figure is different. The approaches, perceptions of the figure that needs to be at the end is quite different. There is only one empirical research that most of the parties are referring to is Nicholas Stern Vera Songwe report, which came up with a figure of $2.4 trillion in general as a global requirement for transition. And 1.4 trillion out of this is supposed to be for the internal investments, and 1.1 trillion in general for international assistance, donor grant-based, let's say, assistance. And now the parties are discussing more how to identify, and one of the models of potential NCQG is to have a multi-layered kind of approach. There's 100 billion plus to be at the core of this figure, this multi-layered approach, let's say also. It's called onion approach. And we have already a precedent for that coming from Biodiversity COP, where China and US finally agreed in their, with Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, that this multi-layered approach was the one that can be based on with a certain quantum at the end. What can be done by other stakeholders? In the run-up to COP29, there will be several avenues, as you rightly mentioned. And even before that, even before our retreat in Azerbaijan, there will be MOCA, Ministerial on Climate Action in China, taking place. It will be followed by the heads of delegation retreat in Azerbaijan, then UNGA High-Level Week, Summit of the Future being within it. And then, of course, if we talk about finance, there will be technical expert dialogue meeting in Baku at the beginning of October, followed by a high-level ministerial dialogue, HLMD event in Baku, followed by pre-COP and COP. So there will be several opportunities provided by Azerbaijan as a platform to discuss and find where those issues can be resolved. But again, the major issue is that at the end, two major elements, two questions. Who should be paying? And the second question, how much? These are the questions that cannot be resolved in any platform before COP. This is something that will be really depending on the result of negotiations at the end of the COP itself. And also some external factors, including the election issues. This year, more than 4 billion people are going to vote. More than 60 countries have elections. And one of them has more detrimental impact than others on the outcome of the COP. But does it really have an impact, have a potential to impact on the outcome? This is, of course, question of the time. But I would like also to touch on the G20 issue. G20 having a summit right in the middle of the COP in Azerbaijan on 18th and 19th of November. Initially, we were thinking that it's not good for COP29 because it could affect somehow the level of participation. But later, we found out that it could have an even positive effect on the outcome because, as Mr. Korosi mentioned, 80% of the global emission is on G20 countries, and around 80% of the global GDP is on the G20 countries. It means any decision coming out of G20 summit will have also a detrimental impact on the outcome of COP29. Therefore, we are working with Brazilian G20 presidency to have COP29 G20 presidential dialogue to synergize and align our work with each other and to see how we can work together to come up with a single solution that could be good for both tracks. And in October, there will be a finance ministers meeting of G20 in Brasilia, where Azerbaijan as COP29 presidency will also take part and also try to reach out and settle right before the COP any outstanding issues that we will be having by that time. Thank you.
Zlatko, may I just add? Yeah. Exactly. Just continue the thoughts of our colleague. One of the proverbs, a very popular proverb that I really totally disagree, but I see it everywhere, including at the global negotiations, is don't give me advice, give me money. Believe me, I talk to all the leaders in Africa. I talk to all the leaders in Latin America. Yeah, you can give me a lot of ideas, give me money. That's, I want to point just with one sentence. Why is that so dangerous? Because governments are not there to disperse money, to give money. Governments are there to create policies, platforms, so that businesses, people's ideas, institutional ideas to be realized, to be flourished. My point is here that actually Azerbaijan can make a difference. It can show a totally different example to the world. Because when the contract of the future was signed, Azerbaijan did not have money. It was a poor country. And they were not asking for money. They made a platform that brought prosperity with the right partners in place. So actually, the same could happen in Africa. The same could happen in Latin America. It's not just about wait for the G7, G20, somebody to give you money. It's not about that. It's about building your own platforms in your own countries that within the right partners. Could be World Bank, could be United, whatever, could be private partners. Together, you can make a difference. And again, when I was very proud to put my signature on the first pipe from the Southern Gas Corridor, $46 billion, Azerbaijan was not able to raise the money, but they had the vision. And they brought 16 countries together. They brought the banks together, even I don't know how many, 25 banks, a consortium. What I'm trying to say is it's the opposite. It's not giving money, it's having the right idea, creating the right platform of participation and partnership, then the money comes.
Csaba, I mean, I don't have to give any question to Rosen, which was intended, because he already answered it. Thank you. Csaba, I'll give you the same question like to Rosen. Just go.
Yeah.
But I would please very much, if you could say a few words about, because you're someone who knows from inside, fresh, UN, how the UN functions, UN as a multilateral, the biggest multilateral organization. And what do you think that should be expected or should be done from UN and from UN-related agencies, parts of UN and so on? You spoke about, and Rosen spoke very much about the role of private sector. I mean, and we heard about what the role of the governments should be and so on. But could you just, whatever you're going to say it. But please, I would like you to say a little bit about also UN perspective. How do you see that?
I try. Let me also start from money, because it will be financing, the financing and enabling COP. As the UN works, as the multilateral negotiations work, we all know that we are in a phase of grandstanding. We are trying to ratcheting up numbers and threatening each other. 1 trillion, 400 billion, 2 trillion, 3 trillion, or even higher. No one even understands the gravity of these numbers. So let's go back to the sober level. It will not be the final outcome of any COP to say that, fine, it will be 2.5 trillion or 1.5 trillion. What the UN can help and the member states can help, that let's see what and how any finances, let them come from private sector, from MDBs, from government to government sources, how those finances will be used. Because that will make a difference. If we double the checks, it does not mean that climate change goes away. If we improve the projects that can increase the resilience of our economies, that will help climate change. Most probably, at a certain point of time, probably before Baku or maybe in Baku, we have to bring forward this type of logic. Let's make our financial systems more able and capable of absorbing the investments. The second, are regulations better equipped to absorb investments and absorb technologies. And markets will help quite a lot. But the ideological discussions of how many trillions within 2 or 3 years, well, it's fascinating, but it would not take us too far. And last but not least, how the UN system itself can help. UN will not distribute money. UN is in very deep trouble itself in terms of finances. What UN can help member states to make sure that if projects are viable, if agreements on potential rules of financing are closer, then countries would be better equipped to absorb the technologies and absorb the finances. So the UN agencies on the ground in developing countries could be very, very helpful identifying the priority areas where and how finances could be used in different countries. Not in terms of how many trillions should be the final number. Thank you.
Excellent. Please, could you bring the mic in here? We have 2 questions, Prime Minister Roman and Prime Minister Tambayev. John, you are first, and then...
Thank you.
Roman.
I'm from Kyrgyzstan, from our brotherhood nation of Azerbaijan. It's not Azerbaijani COP, but our. So I want to make it success. Not that Azerbaijan will be just delivering baton from Dubai given to Brazil. And then it's almost impossible to compete with those countries, both politically and economically. So we have to find unique solution that, as Rosen said, COP29 will remain in history forever. Not hunting for the numbers, for things which big, but to find peculiarity which will make COP29 unique. Then my question, my boss, to you, what we are doing here? NGIC brought the best brains around the world to Baku to exercise again with our knowledge of green transition. No. I would advise, I don't know, maybe it's a little late, to focus on our session, not just exercising in our knowledge of this transition, but to advise to the lead negotiator and his team what would be the peculiarity and ideas how to make this summit unique, how to capture the minds and hearts of people live on our planet. Azerbaijan is not big in terms of economic power, political power, but in brains we can do much better if we will be doing it, for instance, in our 2 days, 3 days exercises. I would have even some practical proposal with a focus on quality to make COP28 like in Dubai impossible, honestly. Brazil, probably not. Focus on quality. Number 2, just practical proposal on making kind of headline as building trust. Because this world is not one which is building trust. And Azerbaijan, as a developing countries, very dynamic, with very dynamic educational population, could be showing example on how to build trust. You was a very successful chairman in the non-alignment movement. You have extremely important influence to so-called global South countries. Why don't you pull them to the discussion? But the main proposal, our boss, is maybe, this is session number 1, right? Maybe if you agree or not, I don't know, maybe we can focus how to help to lead negotiator to get focused around the areas which will make COP29 unique. Thank you.
Well, I think the question is, what can we expect from COP29? Frankly, what can we expect from COP29? Why I ask this question is because advancing on our path to a more or less comfortable future under the impact of the climate change, advancing is facing a terrible slowing down due to reality, the geopolitical situation standings, I would say. On one hand, we have cooperation on climate change, on non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. On the other hand, the same countries are on confrontation, even conflict. Ukraine, Gaza, trade. It's a terrible ambivalence of our time. Now, from the perspective of a scientist, myself, not as a politician, I'm telling you, whatever would be the conclusions of the scientists, of climate scientists, their implementation is almost impossible, or really very meager, if this ambivalence is not somehow solved let's together, all these countries, all these powerful countries, on COP29, set and say, we cooperate on that, we are in competition, even in confrontation. Don't mix the things, because we cannot advance towards a sustainable and resilient future. In fact, in my intervention tomorrow, I'm speaking about a post-climate change era. It could be very dangerous, because the dynamic of the climate change right now shows that there is an acceleration. We could reach, not very far in the future, a threshold, a critical threshold. Beyond the critical threshold, we cannot imagine the damages to our way of life. So let's solve this ambivalence. Cooperation, whenever it's possible, and leave this cooperation free from the confrontation. I think COP29 should tackle this problem, how to solve this ambivalence. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm the WHO representative in Azerbaijan. I'm not a politician. I'm a medical doctor and public health specialist, but I've been very, very interested in following up with the within the international arena of how things are going to get better for health issues, hopefully. I was at the recent World Health Assembly 77 2 weeks ago in Geneva, and we were a bit disappointed to see that the pandemic treaty negotiations are going a little bit slower than we medical doctors expect. But then I started thinking about this, and COVID actually gave us a very fertile ground to deepen the us versus them rhetoric. It started in March 2020 when European countries started blaming Italy, for example, for being lazy, for being not attentive enough, etc. And this, I think we are seeing this evolution into the international rhetoric right now, even in these discussions. My question to you is it possible to tackle this us versus them rhetoric by expanding us to include them? And is it possible to reframe the situation on solidarity instead of money, as you have been mentioning here? Thank you.
Ismail, then I would ask you to also, just first, one more question up there. Yeah. Since Csaba directly, Ismail, Csaba directly asked you, so I mean, you should also, if you want to pass any question, but you can answer to Csaba. Of course, you can answer that tomorrow when he's on panel together with Roman and we are chairing another, but you can do that today as well. I mean, that's okay.
Yes, thank you very much. I start with the fact. We've had 28 COPs. From my perspective, they are failures, because we have had 28 COPs and we are heading towards 2.5 degrees Celsius, if not more. So what I would like to see in COP29 is trying to do something very different from the previous 28 COPs. We cannot just continue doing the same thing over and over again and expect different results. We have to do something really different. And there are two points that were raised that I found extremely interesting. First, President Rosen said, governments are not there to give money. And that was the problem with previous COPs. We've always had governments announcing big numbers and then nothing happens really. And the other point, His Excellency, the Chief Negotiator said, there's a problem with the private sector not going to invest in developing countries. And that's really what we need, is private sector investments. So my question to you is, can we think in COP29 to be the place where we start creating a new platform to bring in private investment, to bring in green investments, stop what we have been doing in the past that has not worked, and let's really think outside the box and think of something new.
Ismail, with all due respect, I mean, we have already fifth question and first answer. Ismail.
Well, I think we have 2 days of discussions ahead of us, so we will have a chance to explore some of these things. I think the first thing that I can pick on is what Hafiz Ghanem just said, that we've had discussions about governments. And governments, in fact, do not have the resources that are required, not even near. I mean, to put it in perspective, we're talking about the total amount of official development assistance from the rich world to the poor world is about 200 billion. All the international financial organizations are providing mostly loans, not grants, about another maybe 50 to 70 billion dollars. And there's no way of building that up anywhere near what is required for the SDGs, because you have to take care of health and education as well as protecting the adaptation and resilience against the questions of climate change and its impacts. So bringing in the private sector is very important, but that requires changes in government policies and requires changes in, because you have to ask, why is the private sector willing, for example, to invest in the foreign debt of Egypt, but not willing to invest in projects in Egypt? Well, partly because they will say, well, you know, there's currency exchange risks, there's all sorts of things. This is sovereign debt. I accept sovereign debt. But do we recognize that today the developing countries are in fact paying back more in interest than they are receiving in all the official developments? So we have a serious problem there. We know the money is available, but it is not coming because there are a number of things. We can change, we can provide international guarantees, we can provide insurance, we can provide hedge funding, but even then, these projects are inherently risky. Working in Niger or in Chad or wherever are difficult, very difficult. So that, not to mention conflict areas and so on that are all around the world right now. So we need to find ways of also grouping these projects so that we can offer them in a securitized fashion so that you don't have huge lumpy investments that private sector people may not want to do. You should put them in a way where somebody can put in $10,000 and somebody can put $10 million and somebody can put $100 million. And that requires creating portfolios, securitized portfolios, where yes, you will have failures in these projects, maybe about 10, 15%, but where the international organizations and the international banking system can provide these kinds of guarantees on that. So that there's a possibility of bringing in the funding in a new way. But that requires all the governments to agree. We are facing today, in fact, in this coming month, we will be exactly 80 years since the foundation of the Bretton Woods system, the financial system that exists in the world. We keep saying the UN needs restructuring. The Bretton Woods system needs restructuring. And we need to change the mandates of these countries. We need the IMF to be able to issue SDRs that aren't distributed in accordance to your wealth. I mean, it sounds absurd, but that's the way it is. We created 640 billion. Is that, how was I forget how many? It was 640 billion were created in the IMF, and it was distributed in proportion to your wealth. So the poor countries basically, you know, they received nothing. Yeah, nothing. I mean, but by the time you get to the poor countries, so yeah, we really must change these things. We've been saying that before, but it hasn't been done, and we don't know whether it can be done. And I think we shouldn't be putting too much on the shoulders of one event, which will be COP29. But we must recognize that it can be the place where a catalysis occurs, where people come together and maybe adopt a new vision. And we have a number of things that we can do in areas which are not conventionally seen as part of COP, whether it is health, or it is agriculture, or it is water, or it is this, but where they all interact on a win-win-win basis. And that, I think, is something that we have a responsibility to try to bring about, to create that solidarity that you were mentioning earlier on. A sense of solidarity that we're all in this together, but not just the rich versus the poor, those who are polluting, those who aren't. But we should not forget climate justice. It is unfair to expect that those who contributed least to the problem should be those who suffer most. And I think there is a growing sense of moral outrage about that. And I cannot forget my colleague from Kenya who said to me after we created the Loss and Damage Fund, we created a bucket, but there's nothing in it. We have a bucket, a new bucket called Loss and Damage. Well, we need to do something about that. But it's not just collecting the damage, it is really changing the attitudes. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more question. Because of gender balance, you'll get the time. Please, there is one more. Yes, you can do that because we are running out of time. I mean, with all due respect. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Aditi Mukherjee from the CGIAR, and my question was, like, we keep hearing that this COP is really about a finance COP and the importance of NCQG, and the fact that in Bonn, while many of the discussion tracks progressed, NCQG did not see a lot of it. With the related tracks like the GGA and others, many of them actually did not have enough mention of means of implementation. So the question is literally about how is the presidency looking at that particular NCQG, and how then are the sectoral ones like GGA, like the Sharm el-Sheikh on agriculture, because all of them have the same issue that nobody is discussing means of implementation, because they're saying all means of implementation, aka finance, would be in the NCQG, while NCQG did not really come up with a bigger envelope. So for many of us who work on sectors like we work on agriculture, we are very keen to see means of implementation in each of the negotiation track, be it GGA, be it Sharm el-Sheikh. So that was kind of our question around the NCQG.
Okay, thank you. Well, one more only because of gender balance. You will go for next session, okay? Just please.
Thank you very much. My name is Mira Shah. I'm from the Ban Ki-moon Center based in Vienna normally. I don't really have a question. I actually would really like to reiterate a couple of points from the Prime Minister for Kyrgyzstan. This COP should really emphasize trust building, and I really hope that you will take that forward. But I think if you break that down and you look back at where the trust is broken, then you will see that really it is about finance. It is the fact that finance has failed so far. We have not delivered really on the 100 billion that we were supposed to. So I really hope that finance will be at the center of this. And from a perspective of African countries, I hope that you will put adaptation on the forefront of that. I think financing for adaptation will really help to kickstart some of that trust building. And finally, to build on that, I hope that you will allow developed countries, however we call them in the new frameworks, to make large promises at the front of the COP so that they can kickstart this trust-building process for COP29. That is my message.
Thank you. And we have one more, because we have a panel devoted to the young people. So we have one of our young leaders who wants to take, and it would not be fair to keep him out, because no one should be left behind, right?
Thank you so
Especially
much,
young
Professor.
people. Go.
My name is Manus Chawla. I'm a young leader from the United Kingdom. We're all talking about financing and about bringing in the private sector. But to some degree, I would argue, the cold, hard truth is that the private sector is losing interest. And if you look at, we mentioned ESG, if you simply look at the statistics on ESG in the last 2 years, interest in ESG funding and ESG investment is down. There's only one state in the US now, California, that has pro-ESG legislation, 15 states that are banning ESG funds. So when we talk about bringing in the private sector, how do we actually make sure that they're interested and actionably interested? And what can governments do to make sure that this happens in the next 6 months?
Thank you. Thank you. Now, We will go without answering by one because we had 8 questions, called questions and comments and statements. And a lot of those questions were actually answering to the questions that were passed by some of you before. So it will be much easier for our panelists to answer because there will be so many questions that were already answered by another questionnaires. So please, Csaba, you start with picking up what do you think is the most
Thank you,
proper.
Zlatko, and many, many thanks for your contributions and your notions. As I was listening to your notions, suggestions, I heard 2 major ideas emerging. And none of them are now on the table of negotiators. So it might be something that can steer the course of event before and during the COP29. First is what I heard from you, a kind of Baku commitment to joint solutions is about to emerge. It's a political commitment, which is flying much higher than the geopolitical competition. It's about acknowledging that we need the solutions, and it is, I think, relatively easy for the leaders to buy in. And the second, what I heard is also, in my understanding, could be a game changer, a kind of platform helping boost private investments. Identifying the factors that can boost the investment, the technologies can be showcased during COP29, and I would put a third very big question into this platform is the very pragmatic notion of debt restructuring that will give movement of maneuvering for many other countries. So if we can do something on these 2 platforms, on the political Baku commitment for joint solution, and on the other, the platform how to boost, in pragmatic terms, private investments, I think it can bring the success, what we are all trying to see here in Baku.
Thank you, Zlatko. There are always solutions that are sound, that are sustainable, that work and bring results. I start with Manas, young leaders first. As we said, governments are there for policies. Let me give you a solution and a good example. The European Union passed legislation that basically says whatever product, whenever it comes, is going to be sold after 2026 on the joint European market, needs to have an ESG reporting about that product, reporting everything. How many, whatever, is there child slavery, yes or no? How many emissions? What about this? So that consumers can read and take their own conscious decisions. I am buying this, or I can buy the other one who is more ESG. So educating people, young people, you're so important about that. The European Union is helping you. With this new legislation, we can pass it all over the world. Whatever you sell, have a label on the climate impact. Here is another solution. Ismail said something very important. We have a lot of countries that are overburdened with debts. So what do you do to help them? To catch up. Here is a solution. Greece, 185% debt to GDP ratio by 2009. Totally bankrupt, no trust of the markets, nobody is there to help them. The European Union is coming with an instrument, but a very different one. It's not about just giving money. There was no trust even back then because there was a populistic government. The instrument was, okay, we understand they cannot pay the debt, we freeze it, we prolong it, but we create a new mechanism where they will be compensated for new projects that certify to certain priorities. Greece today, out of 185% debt to GDP, is 140. Is an amazing example of smart policies in place. Greece today is building cities of the future, transportation of the future, digital governments of the future. By being desperate 5 years, 7 years ago, run by populists. Why is that miracle happening? Because of smart solutions that work. The same we could have for the African countries. It's not giving them money. Make a fund that makes you continue, but giving priorities. Another example, Connecting Europe facility. Europe was giving trillions of dollars to the member states. It's not there anymore. You make Connecting Europe facility where, for example, from Croatia to Romania, they have to build a digital infrastructure for electric car trucks and whatever, hydrogen trucks. But that is a joint project. And it's not governments giving money. It's the European Connecting Europe facility giving, as Ismail said, in a fund 50 billion, guarantees for credits that come from the private sector to the private sector to create a project that works for people. We can say there are good examples all over the place, and that's how I see the Azeri presidency, and I'm grateful to all of you, changing the approach. Stop just talking about the political correctness, just talking about the propaganda, because most of the leaders today, they don't even talk to you. They talk to their propaganda machines. That's what they do, no matter if it's the Russian leader or could be Trump. The change that Azerbaijan can do is bring inclusive, pragmatic approach with solutions that work. They're available. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Yeah, I'll try to reflect on some of the questions raised. On comparison between Baku and previous COPs, I think each COP is unique, and we cannot expect each COP to deliver on its outcomes in the same way as previous COPs did, or in terms of attendance. So we are concentrating mostly on quality of what we are delivering. It means we will not be expecting more participants than Dubai. We are not going to organize more events than Dubai. This is not something that we are trying to have in Baku, but trying to mainly focus on those deliverables that we are expected by the parties to do. And last year in Dubai, for example, there were 187 events in both green and blue zones, and all were quite interesting and useful events. But some small delegations were complaining that for them it was very difficult to go and attend in every event that is being held simultaneously, because they also had to take part in the negotiation process. Trust building, this is one of the most important priority for Azerbaijani presidency. There is an ongoing BTR process, biannual transparency reports, and this is kind of operationalization of enhanced transparency framework coming from Paris Agreement. This issue also was prioritized by Azerbaijan at the beginning of the year, and we try now to bring together the parties to help each other to come up with their transparency reports. Why it is important? We have identified two major issues when we started this process. One is technical issue, which is that Secretariat should make the software available for the parties to submit their BTR. But the more important problem is political nature, because some developing countries are still reluctant in submitting their BTRs, because they think that once they submit their reports, they will be subject to naming and shaming by the developed countries. So that they are hesitating that once they submit, they will be finger pointed by some. And that brings me to answer to the question by Hande Hanım on us versus them narrative. This is something that needs really to have an enabling environment, a trusted environment among all the parties, that they can freely exchange their views on what they think, and at the end of the day to come up with conclusion. What can be done to change this narrative? Of course, you can, and I will put my hat on as only chief negotiator, not as deputy minister. I will be saying that the COP process, in my view, and sorry, Vladanka, for that, is the only efficient UN processes that really deliver something. I cannot say only on means of implementation, but at least the parties can come together and can, at the end of the day, agree on some commitments. Of course, means of implementation is necessary to operationalize them, but this is a process that brings together the parties. If we see the number of negotiating groups continue to grow, we cannot, and this fragmented approach, we cannot end this us versus them approach. Each party, by building up new negotiating group and coming back to the negotiation stage, saying that, okay, this is our position and we are distinct from you, this is not the right approach in our view. On NCQG, of course, the progress, I wouldn't say that there was no progress in Bonn, and on, at least in terms of having a paper to start discussing NCQG was already a progress, and we, in 2 weeks, we already shortened it twice to continue the negotiation. But at the end of the day, this is only Baku COP that will decide at the higher political level whether the quantum or contributor weights can be agreed or not. But adaptation definitely is also, we are part of the global south. But at the same time, we have the impartiality duty as incoming presidency. We understand the importance of adaptation to be at the forefront because of also many parties are bringing this issue and also the finance. But at the same time, some developing groups try to have a balanced approach, putting mitigation also on the scene. So we as incoming presidents are expected to strike a right balance among the pillars of the Paris Agreement, including mitigation, adaptation, and finance to be equally treated. But as part of Global South, we completely understand the issue. And finally, on the investment issue, that if we can make Baku COP to be a platform for investment, definitely, and this is the approach that we have been so far upholding, most of our action agenda initiatives also include investment components. Like we bring up the agriculture initiative, we call it Harmonia, it was developed together FAO, and it has investment component. Like if you want farmers to really enjoy their activities, you need to bring also investment for them. Without finance, they cannot do anything, and they cannot do it sustainably. And it applies also to other initiatives, and we will be also organizing Business and Philanthropy Forum in Baku, at the Baku COP, which also bring together the CEOs of major companies to come up with particular solutions and also to pledge some amounts of, for the implementation of the commitments. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. In closing, obviously this was the first session. It was intended to actually identify what are the key issues and challenges. And it was easy for us to identify those key challenge issues because there is 7 other panels that is following this first one, and those panels are structured around the key challenges and issues. I'm sure that a lot of things that you are having in mind we'll have opportunity to discuss in panels that are devoted to that. Having said so, I think I want to thank first to all our panelists, 3 of them, but also I want to underline again that this is unusual that we had a panel which started late, which is usually the fact, that's usual thing. We started late, that's the reason why we are out of time a little bit, but we stick less than it was planned, and we had 8, I won't say questions, we had 8 discussions with very clear perspective on questions related to their discussions, which helped a lot to make this overall discussion much richer. Of course, just to remind you that COP29 is, as we heard, a lot of objections about COP, positive, negative, and so on. But it reminded me of the usual phrase about democracy, it's not perfect, but nothing better is invented yet. It applies to United Nations. United Nations are not perfect, far from perfect, but always when we put that on the table, we have to warn ourselves what would happen today, how the world would look like if there would be no United Nations. So United Nations are not. And COP is like United Nations. It's not perfect, but without COP, we will be definitely in a bigger misery than we are today. Having said so, I want to once again to underline that discussions that we had about finance, there will be panel devoted to it, but a lot of other panels will be also speaking about finance related to another topic. So I'm sure that we will have, of course, here is just I want to underline that when it comes to finance, we as NGIC, we have 2 extraordinary men who are working on that. Our special advisor, Gordon Brown, who is definitely the person who knows what he's talking about when he's talking about finance. We have Jean-Claude Trichet, that was just a few months ago in here in Global Baku Forum, which is the guy who invented Euro still functioning, and Euro and him, and he's going to participate very strongly about our ideas in an NGIC platform about financing, not only about financing. Last but not the least, we heard two major issues that are now on agenda for chief negotiator. One is financing, another one that is going better, and better is a carbon market, that those things are going to be, let's say, a little bit positive things about it, much more positive about financing. But go back and finish with this. Rosen, what would, I think we should think about, what will be the outcome? What will be the headline? What will be the top bullet on after COP29? I think it's food for thoughts. We should think about it. I'll just, from this discussion, it came to me that, as Csaba, you were pointing out, that people talk about trillions. We're very easy when we talk about trillions. We are missing billions. Of course, a lot of people are saying it's time to move from billions to trillions, which is okay, of course. But before moving from billions to trillions, maybe there is something in between. And maybe COP29 should be a milestone on something in between, which will be pushing in the right direction. I don't think that we can come to trillions, but maybe, just think about that. This COP should be double down COP. Double down on 4P, 2P, and R. What is that? Double down on issue of financing our carbon market, but double down through the people, public, private, Gene, right? Private, and partnership. So double down, public, private, people, partnership. Double down that. And double down that in direction of peace and prosperity. Because COP29 may be a good milestone to rethink about ongoing wars that are going on in the world. And maybe this is like, as we were discussing this morning, like peace truce. I mean, maybe COP29 is good, right, Maria? A good point, at a good moment to, let's say, stop a little bit, stop shooting, and think that there is a bigger picture behind us. Someone will win in those shooting, but all of us are going to be losers because of COP29 and other COPs not having proper results. And when I said R is resilience. Resilience, over there. Let's try to be more resilient. So double down resilience. Double down resilience through the partnership of public, private, and people. And do it as in the context of peace and prosperity. So we have goals, we have everything. To double down, try to double down the things as a pathway to trillions and as a pathway to what the COP is about, right? So we'll have enough time next 2 days to discuss about it. Thank you so much. In 5 minutes break, or 10 minutes, okay? 10 minutes to have a coffee because we spent one coffee break, which we didn't have, but we did have.